Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing my must-have can't live without drugstore brushes. These are the drugstore brushes that I feel like I need in my, makeup routine, and then I'm also going to show you how to use them. So I'm going to show you like how I like to use them, the way that they work, and trying to give you a little bit more of an in-depth look at how to use these specific brushes. So I hope this is really helpful. If you would like to see a addition to this video where I go over more investment brushes and like brushes that have a higher price point, but brushes that I truly feel like I use a lot, I will do that for you as well. And one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is with these brushes, they might be called a blush brush or an eyeshadow brush. I want to tell you, like, look at the brush for what it is and how you can use it versus what it's maybe specifically intended for, because when you start kind of like thinking outside the box with these brushes, you can kind of achieve any result that you want from the brush. So we're just gonna get into it because this is probably gonna be like really long. I do prefer to blend out my illuminator with a brush, and one of my favorite brushes to do this with is the Ultimate Blending Brush. Now this is from e.l.f. and you can see this one's not super dense, but it's nice and dense enough to where you can get some good buffing action going, which really helps work the product into your skin. So I'm gonna just apply my illuminator all over my face, and then I'll start with almost like a stippling motion. This is gonna help spread the product all over your face so that you get a nice even application. And I do feel like this brush does a good job at almost kind of like shearing everything out so that you get the perfect amount. And then once you've gotten the illuminator mixed in, not mixed in, but applied, you can really see it just kind of shears everything out perfectly so that your base just looks more luminous and more lit from within versus like just kind of slathered on there. So I really like the way that this brush just kind of disperses the illuminator all over the face perfectly, and you have like just the right amount of product all over the skin and a nice even application. When it comes to skin tint, tinted moisturizer, foundation, and applying those types of products, I do think you have different options. So obviously you have your traditional sponge. I'm gonna focus on more showing you how you can use this as a blending tool versus an actual like traditional application method, but obviously this is like a standard for a lot of people. One of the best affordable options in my opinion is the one from Real Techniques. Honestly, the brush that I would consider an absolute must-have is the Complexion Duo brush from e.l.f. So on one end you have a smaller, more precise blender, and then you have obviously a bigger one that you can use for application or blending as well. I would say that this is the most similar tool that I've found to one of my favorites, which is from IT Cosmetics, the Heavenly Luxe Duo. This is essentially the same thing. The bristles are slightly different, but it achieves very similar results as that one. Or I also have this one. This is the 080 brush from Real Techniques. Kind of looks like a paddle paintbrush. So really nice for just laying product down on the skin like this. If you tend to wear more traditional full coverage foundations, this is really nice for kind of thinning it out over the skin. And then that's when I would go in with something like a sponge to really blend it in and get rid of any of those streak marks. But I don't wear full coverage foundation quite as much anymore, so I find myself reaching for the Complexion Duo brush far more often. So I'm going to use this one today. I'm going to start off with just one pump of foundation on the back of my hand. You can apply this to all the quadrants of the face, and then I will take my brush. I'm going to use the bigger side, and basically in the same motion I'm just going to try to lightly apply the product all over the skin just so I can get a nice even layer and really work it all over my face. And then once I've gotten a nice layer of the product everywhere, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to start doing my buffing motion. We're not working hard, we're letting the brush do the work. So when I'm holding the brush, I'm not like grazing, like pushing it into my skin like this. I'm letting the bristles do the work and I'm just lightly grazing the skin. And that is how you're gonna get more of like a kind of like, I don't want to say airbrush because we're not really going for like a full flawless look, but it's just gonna help the product like sit nicer on your skin versus like blending it away into nothing, which sometimes if you blend a little bit too hard, you can almost like push the foundation back into the brush and then it will disappear. So don't want to use too much pressure, just lightly buffing all over the skin. Buff and take your time. You don't have to be quick with the foundation. If you really want a nice application, just kind of take your time. And then the nice thing about this brush from e.l.f. is any of those like little nooks and crannies on the face, so like the corner of the nose or under the eyes, you can then go in with this side of the brush and blend all those areas out so that you don't just have foundation or concealer kind of sitting there. And this is the point where I would go in with my sponge. So I'm going to take this and lightly almost kind of further press that product in. You can also use this almost as like an eraser. It's gonna kind of take away any slight streak marks that you might have had. If you found your blending to be a little bit streaky, or you just wanna really push it in a little bit more, this is when you wanna do a little bit more pressure with the sponge, just like that. Now the sponge is also gonna do a really good job at picking up any excess product. So if you feel like you have anything just kind of sitting there and it's not really blending away, go in with your sponge, just lightly tap all over the base and just go right around the jaw area so you can get a nice blend right there. Perfect. And now you can see how using the sponge more as like a blending tool can also be really handy. So you can use it for application. I've just found that I feel like applying with a traditional brush and then blending it out with the sponge is also a really nice route to take. Next, I'm gonna go in with concealer. I'm gonna show you two different brushes that I really like for concealer. So obviously, first option, we do have the other end of this e.l.f. brush. This is really nice and I really like this. I feel like it's a little bit better when you're doing just kind of like any type of easy concealing. So around the eyes and things like that. However, I will say if you're really trying to be meticulous, I do find that sometimes this can leave just slight brush strokes. It's not every time and it's not with every concealer, but oftentimes I feel like there's a little bit of a stroke mark, which again, we would just go in with our sponge and blend that out. However, Real Techniques makes a deluxe crease brush and I don't use this for eyes, I use this for concealer. You can see it's almost got this really nice ball-shaped taper to it. It's also a little bit more fluffy and more dense in comparison to the one from e.l.f. The e.l.f. one's just a little bit flatter on top, which I would probably contribute to some of that streakiness. So this is ideal for me for in the eye area because you can really get some good buffing action going and then completely negating any type of stroke mark, and really nice for concealing around the face as well. So it just never really leaves behind a trace, which is why I really prefer this as like my concealer brush of choice. And it's so soft on the skin too, which I really, really like. So it's great for right under the eyes. It's still, although it's, you know, more ball shaped, I really like how it fits into all the crevices really nicely. And then it just blends out any concealer, or like if you're trying to hide hyperpigmentation or anything like that on the face, it blends out so nicely. And what I'll do is almost like push it in like this, and then when I'm ready to blend, I'll hold further back on the handle like this and then just lightly blend the product all over. It's such a good concealer brush and it's so comparable to one of my like favorite more pricey brush options. That's a little bit more of a sheer wash of concealer, but I just want to show you how well this brush works if you want to build it up. So let's say you want to go in with another layer of concealer. Same thing, you take your brush but kind of hold it further back on the end so that you're not moving the product around quite as much, and lightly just like tapping it right where you want to keep that concealer and just lightly blending it over those areas, and it really beams up that under eye. So it just like sits a little bit softer on the face, which I really like. Moving into like a cream, contour, or bronze type of situation, I really think if you want to be a little bit more precise with where you're placing the products, the Expert Face Brush from Real Techniques is great. Really nice and dense, it's quite stout, so you get a lot of control when you're applying the products. So I'm gonna take the Mario cream bronzer base and I'm just going to show you how you can almost do like a little bit more of a dramatic result with this one. So you can see it's just laying the product down a little bit more dramatic, and it's going to just give you more impact from that product in general because it's just going to go on a little bit more full coverage because of how dense these bristles are. Now if you want something a little bit more natural, I would recommend going back in with the e.l.f. Ultimate Blending Brush. It's just not quite as densely packed together, and you can still pick up the products, but you'll see it's just gonna kind of like disperse it in a little bit more of a like all over the face type of way. and it's just going to kind of set down in more of like a natural, kind of like tanned skin vibe versus a contour or like precise bronzer vibe. And then instead of the contour laying down just on certain parts of the face, you're gonna get more of like an even dispersion of the product. You can see it's just kind of kissing my face all over the place. It's easy to blend. I don't have to think too much about it, so that's why I really like this brush for cream products. Now I showed you this side, but if you wanted to use this for a more dramatic look, what you're gonna have to do is kind of go in slowly and stipple a little bit more carefully where you exactly want to lay down your creams. And then when you wanna do a little bit of blending, kind of hold it on an angle. And again, not pushing hard, but just slightly diffusing the line of where exactly you place that product. And if you want to angle out the jaw and everything, you can do that too. So you can see, same cream product, big difference depending on the density of the bristles of the brush that you choose. So if you want more dramatic, go for something dense like this. And then if you want something just a little bit more all over the face, something like this is nice. And then if you feel like you want to also just like blend something out, you can use this to almost like push it and disperse it all over again. This next brush is, again, an absolute must-have in my opinion. This is the blush brush from Real Techniques. It's got this fabulous ball shape to it, really great medium density. It's actually quite fluffy, but a brush like this is my absolute kryptonite. This is my favorite shape of brush, or one of my favorite shapes of brush, but using this for bronzer, highlights, setting powder, blush, anything like that, the shape of this brush is going to essentially make it impossible for you to make yourself look crepey or dry. So I'm going to show you this with bronzer and blush, and probably highlight too a little bit, but I'm going to start off with blush so we don't like get some bronzer on it. So I'm just going to take my blush, and then the way I like to do it is just kind of, again, lightly apply this all over. It just makes it so that you can really control the intensity of the products that you're using. And because it's got this really nice ball shape, the way it just dispenses the product onto the skin is perfect. Like, you're never gonna have to worry about going in too intense with any color products because you're gonna have to build them up. And I feel like you just get such a almost like professional looking result every time, because this is one of those brushes that will really do the work for you. So there's my blush. It just went on so nice. Of course, if you want to build it up, you can just intensify that. But I like how it just basically applies the blush in all the perfect areas on my face. And the same goes for bronzer, honestly. So you can really kind of load your brush up, tap off any of that excess, and then just lightly apply this all over. And it's gonna, again, like, I don't know why this works so well. It's obviously the shape of the brush, the density of the brush, but it really does such a good job at just laying powders down so nicely to where you can still get intensity from the color of the product that you're using, but you're not gonna get any powder kind of sitting or clinging to certain areas because it just lightly puts down the perfect amount. I like to do a little pinch action like this. And then you can knock whatever bronzer or blush you're wearing right into the crease of the eye to just kind of pull the face together. However, I will say my favorite setting powder brush for the face is the 079 brush from Real Techniques. Really nice, fluffy, beautifully nice and floppy in the best way possible, to where you can just kind of almost like doink powder onto the face and it lays down so beautifully. And typically, when you use something that's a little bit too dense, that's when I feel like, because I have dry skin, it really emphasizes my dryness. So I can go in with just a touch of powder, not too much, because the brush is going to just dispense it over my skin lightly to where I don't even look like I'm wearing powder. So the size of this brush and the bristles are really where the magic is, because you can take a little bit of powder product so much further, and you can literally just lightly tap onto the skin. You can see it's toning down the shine on my face, like on my forehead right now, just slightly, but it's not looking powdery. And I will literally just lightly tap all over. And again, if you feel like you want a little bit more of a precise area, just do a little bit of this pinching action and lightly tap under the eyes. When you're doing like setting powder, what you never want to do is go in and set the face like this or do any type of rubbing motion, you're doing these light patting motions and pushing that powder down versus swiping it all over the skin, especially when you're trying to set. You just want to be starting off with these like pressing motions. I think there's 4 main eyeshadow brushes that can really give you a multitude of different looks, and even if you don't have very many eye brushes, this is a good place to start. So a fluffy big blending brush, more of like a medium-sized blending brush, a flat traditional shadow application brush, a angled brush, and then a smudger brush. This is a Morphe H204 flat shadow brush. I'm not the biggest like Morphe brush fan in general, but they do have some really good affordable options. So this brush is basically just your all-around flat shadow application brush. This can be used with cream and powder. Flat shadow brush is basically just going to give you a nice opaque layer of what you would typically apply to your lid, and it's good for just getting like a dense amount of pigment on the eye, especially if you just want something simple to wear for every day and you're just gonna wear one eyeshadow color. This is really nice to just lay down one eyeshadow color all over the eyelid. And you can use, like if you want to use it for multiple shadows, just use one side for one color, flip it to the clean side, and then you can apply a second color with it as well. This is a Morphe M504. You can either use this brush clean for a little bit of soft blending like this to just soften out any edges that you have, because this one's really nice. It's big and fluffy, and you can see it's just softly diffusing that line really nice so that there's no like end bits, I guess you would say, on my eyeshadow. Or you can also dip it into your eyeshadow just right on the tips of the bristles like this, and then use that again to apply some shadow in the crease and really blend that up to the brow bone. This is a Morphe M573. It's slightly smaller than the one I just showed you, and this is great for like smaller eye types, or if you want a little bit more of a precision with your blend. So like if you wanted to take a darker color and you wanted to apply it to the outer corner, again, you would just take this kind of on the very tips of the bristles of your brush. And when you have the brush like this, it just makes blending deeper colors a little bit easier, and the bristles themselves kind of impact slightly so that when you're blending, you get a little bit more of a crisp blend versus like the big fluffy one. So this is really nice for like outer corner or crease work if you really want to do something dramatic in the crease. This is great. Moving into a little smudger. This is a shading brush from Real Techniques. This one's really nice if you do a little bit of eyeliner. This is gonna help you kind of like diffuse that, get something a little bit more smoky and hazy. But I really love how this brush just smooths out any eyeliner that you have. If you have liquid liner, pencil liner, or if you just want to smudge some darker shadow into the lash line, this is such a great brush. You can also use this brush for the lower lash line. So if you want to apply a little something down there, it's really nice because it's nice and tiny. And you're gonna get more of like a hazy soft effect versus like something that's gonna look really intense. It just kind of makes your under eye have that nice soft smoky. This little angled brush is a definer brush from Real Techniques. Whether or not you feel like you need something like this is totally up to you, but I do think a lot of people probably would use something like this because you can use it to define your lash line with a darker powder shadow and just kind of like pushing and pressing that powder shadow in. It also makes doing winged liner a lot easier if you tend to wear a lot of, you know, powder winged looks. It just has a nice angle to it for kind of creating that type of look. Or you can use it for filling in your eyebrows. If you wear brow powder, a little brush like this is going to make those hair-like strokes look a little bit more natural. I also wanted to throw this one in here. This is the medium shadow brush from Real Techniques. This is one of my favorites for if you're just doing like a light wash of color all over the lid, whatever it may be. It's just nice and big, so it kind of gives you a little bit more of a watercolor effect. But it's also really great for using liquids or shadow pigments specifically, because you can get, like I said, that really nice watercolor effect. So I'll just put the shadow on the back of my hand to pick it up on the brush. And then if you just lightly tap with the side that has the pigment on it, lightly tap that all over the eyelid, it just lays down those pigments so lovely, and it's never too intense. Like, you just get the right amount of wash of the product. And honestly, I feel like this also kind of doubles as a really nice concealer brush or like a nose contour brush. You can kind of use this wherever you see fit, but I do think it's a really nice eye brush as well, because I like to just kind of lay down little bits and bobs of pigment for just like a nice wash of color when I use that. Now for face highlight, like I mentioned, I love this ball brush from Real Techniques, but I also still love the Real Techniques 402. So this is gonna give you a little bit more of a precise highlight, but don't take that in the wrong way thinking that like it's gonna look like 2016. You can still disperse the highlight out really nice with this. So I'm gonna use a liquid today, a little bit on the back of my hand. It's actually like way too much, oh my gosh. I just like wasted this. I don't even know what to do. We're gonna take our brush and we're gonna, when we apply the highlight, we're gonna apply it like on an angle like this. And then just gonna lightly stipple the side with product on the high point of my face. And then I'm gonna flip it over to the clean side, the dry side. And that's the side I'm gonna use to blend it in. So not fully saturating the brush, like all the bristles in the product is really the trick. Because then you can use this really lovely brush to just slightly blend out your highlight. And still, if you feel like it's just a little too intense, go in with that sponge. Like I said, use the sponge to your advantage as like a blending tool. So this is also really nice for doing like any type of precise highlight, like a little bit on the nose. I also think it's nice to throw a tiny bit like right above the arch of your brow. Just kind of like opens up that area and just kind of makes the whole area look a little bit more snatched in a good way. And then like your Cupid's bow. Again, keep that other side nice and clean or dry so that you can use the dry side to do some blending. So there's that. Now if you want to use the big fluffy brush, we're gonna take it and kind of like dip the tips of the bristles into the highlight, and then do more of like a buffing motion, just lightly. Again, we're not pushing hard because we don't want to lift up the makeup underneath, but we're just like grazing right there. And this is going to give you a little bit more of that like filtered looking highlight. I actually really love the way this side looks, because then you can just like kind of tap a little bit onto the ball of the cheek. So obviously if you use this one, it's not going to be the same. You can't really get as precise onto the other areas of the face, but you can still get such a pretty soft dispersed look too. And honestly, one of my last steps, if I like really want my makeup to look extra good, I will like again go in with the sponge and just kind of make sure everything is really nice and blended, or blended as good as I can possibly get it, and almost like remove any mishaps that I might have made. But I really wanted to kind of make this as simple as possible and not include a ton of brushes. I know when I am doing tutorials and stuff, I tend to use a lot of brushes, but that's because I just like the way you can completely control the outcome depending on the brush that you use. However, if you're like a beginner or just a very casual makeup wearer, or even if you want to do like something a little bit more glam like this, I still don't think you need like a ton of brushes. It's just, this is a good starting point to kind of decide what you feel like you need in your collection. On that note, before I forget, the Cinema Secrets Professional Grade Makeup Brush Cleanser, I feel like I have talked about this many times, but this is such an easy way to kind of get yourself in between washes. Obviously, you should still be doing like proper soap and water cleanses with your brushes, but this is a really great way to spot clean your brushes, especially if you don't have a lot of brushes. I will actually show you this stuff in action. So like, where's a dirty one that we used? My little blending brush right here. Usually you would put this in like a tin or a little container so that it's not messy. But then you take your Cinema Secrets, you take just like a dirty, not a dirty rag, but this is my makeup brush cleansing rag, and then you just run the bristles along the rag and it's instantly clean again. It's like the best stuff ever. I'll show you one more time. So there's dirty brush, dunk it into the Cinema Secrets, take it on your rag, and I'm going like this. Kind of really get in there. clean. This is definitely one to check out. So obviously, because I do beauty content, I'm constantly cycling through my brushes, and then it might not necessarily be like dirty, it just has been used once and it's got, you know, eyeshadow pigment on it or a blush color that I, you know, still want to use the same brush for, but I want it to be clean. So that is so nice because I can, you know, use the same brush multiple times before it needs to like have a proper wash. So I cannot recommend that enough. But otherwise, as long as you take care of your brushes, the investment brushes in my opinion are worth it, but also like your base brushes, or if you're just trying to kind of like figure out what brushes you feel like you need, these are a good starting point. So I will list and link all of the makeup products that I wore in this video or used throughout this video, and then I will also put all of these brushes listed and linked in the description box as well. I am also going to have my Instagram and my TikTok. Please come follow me on there. I post beauty content on there too. It's slightly different than my YouTube beauty content, but I'm, you know, still doing like a lot of makeup content on there. So I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching this one. Bye everyone.